This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so today's agenda is that we are going to discuss about something known as infrastructure as a service. Now, this is something that we have done, let's say, in the very beginning of the demo. We said we just gave an introduction to what IaaS really is, infra as a service. Now, infrastructure as a service is one of the offering from the cloud provider. Now, what do I mean by offering? It's just like when you go to buy an apartment, the builder will ask you whether do you want a fully furnished apartment, a semi-furnished apartment, or let's say a very blank skeleton. Now, according to your choice, the price is also going to differ. If you go for a very let's say just a skeleton, the price is less, but you have a lot of responsibility at your end that you have to basically get it furnished and you have to take care of all the appliances inside your home and etc. Meaning the responsibility lies completely upon you in this kind of a model. In the same way, Azure has come up, or Azure basically said that okay, fine, cloud basically is used for renting out services or renting out something known as infrastructure. Meaning, cloud providers will just tell you one thing that okay, fine, I will give you a space or I'll rent some space to you. Like we said when we were looking into storage accounts, the cloud provider said that okay, fine, I'll give some space to you and I'll call this space as a storage account service. You can go ahead, store your unstructured data in that particular service. This is what the cloud provider has actually said to us. So we were able to take that particular storage account service, rent it out for a short time, and we were able to store our data. And whenever we were done, we went ahead and deleted that particular storage account, and we are only paying the cloud provider the cost for that particular usage, only for that particular time period. In the same way, cloud provider now says that okay, fine, in the same way, I'll also go ahead and rent many other services to you. So any service, any infrastructure that I provide to you in the backend is nothing but a physical server, right? Any infrastructure that I provide to you in the backend is nothing but a server. I'm giving some space on the server, or I'm let's say giving you some amount of memory on the server and etc. So at the end of the day, any cloud provider is trying to rent you something known as a space or something known as let's say some amount of RAM or some amount of hard drive on top of the server. Now again, what exactly is a server? Very simple. Server is a huge piece of machine. Like we have our system in, let's say, the cloud world, we have something known as servers. Now, servers come with hard drive, RAM, and etc., which are very, very bigger than what our computers offer. So now I'm telling that renting of the space on top of the server is simply known as cloud. That's what we started off our classes with. Now, now the cloud provider is asking that okay, fine, great. I know that the renting of space on top of let's say a server is a cloud, but what all do you need as a rent? This is where service offering comes into picture. And the cloud provider first asks you, okay, fine, do you want the infra layer as a rent? I'm talking about infra layer, just the infrastructure, meaning the cloud provider is now telling you that okay, fine, I will now give you the RAM, the hard drive, the space, and whatever physical components are there in the backend, which basically which are the properties of a server. I will give you all those services on a rental basis. Now, even the RAM, the hard drive, and etc., right? Even they need some kind of software patching. They need some updates and etc. regularly because there are again, machines and they need firmware updates and all that stuff. Now, all these hardware updates, all the physical hardware updates that are going in the backend is taken care by the cloud provider. In our case, it is Microsoft. So Microsoft tells you that okay, fine, you know what? you don't have to worry about the power supply of the backend server. You don't have to worry about the maintenance of the backend server. You don't have to do that. I will take care of it. You don't worry about it. And I will give you the RAM and the hardware. Now, whatever you do on top of the RAM and hardware, that is not my concern. You do whatever you want, whatever service that you or whatever thing that you want to achieve, you can go ahead and please, basically perform those things out. So, if the cloud provider is only giving you this one, RAM and hardware, but he's not concerned about the operating system, about anything else. Let's talk about what is IIS and runtime basically that you see on the screen. But he's not providing the cloud, he's not providing the operating system and etc. It is you who have to select what operating system you want, and it is you who have to basically maintain that operating system and etc. If this is the model that we are going for, then this is known as infrastructure as a service, wherein you just get the bottom layer. You just get, let's say, the infra layer, which consists of RAM, hard drive, all the physical components which are maintained by the cloud provider. And one of the classic examples of infrastructure as a service is a virtual machine in Azure. Now, this is where I'm coming to a concept, or a very important rather concept, known as virtual machine. Now, before I get into what really virtual machine is, can anyone tell me what do they understand by virtual? Anyone? Anyone, guys?
I think
What
we
do you
can
under? Mhm.
create. I think we are
Okay.
creating a giving a RAM and hard drive. So
Okay.
specification needed. So backend everything it should be taken by the Microsoft. I think.
Yes, that is infrastructure as a service. But I
Yes,
am
sir.
asking, what is virtual?
Virtual means
Not physical.
Exactly. Something that you cannot touch, or something basically that you
yes,
cannot see, but something that just exists. Now, when I say it is a virtual machine, which means it is not a physical machine like your laptop. The laptop that you're using right now is a physical machine. You know that your laptop has some kind of a specifications. You know that your laptop, let's say, has some RAM, some hard drive, and etc. Now, let's a minute talk about, let's say, the physical laptops that we do have. Now, what are the limitations to it and etc. Let's say I am a user, or I am, let's say, the owner of a company, and I establish a small startup, and I say, okay, fine, I need somewhere around 5 to 6 employees. So all these are the employees of my company. So I'll say, okay, fine, there are a couple of employees here. Now, each and every employee to work on, right, needs a machine, a computer, or a laptop, whatever it is. And these days, no one is using, let's say, the desktop computer. So let's talk about an example of a laptop computer. So what I did is that I have 3 employees in my company. So since they need to work, I am ordering 3 laptops for them. I'm saying, okay, fine. Employee one gets the first laptop. Employee two gets the second laptop. Employee three gets the third laptop, and etc. So on and so forth. And I am an IT industry. I'm a small business that I'm starting up with this, these particular employees out here. And the biggest issue here that I'm facing is that every 2 months the employees are coming and telling me that the RAM is not sufficient. Like, I ordered a 4 GB RAM for each and every machine, but the issue is that that 4 GB is not sufficient. The issue is that that particular 4 GB RAM that was ordered is not really sufficient out there. Fine. So what I do, I basically contact, let's say, the seller. Let's say I bought a Dell laptop. I'll call Dell and I'll say, okay, please, provide me 2 more GB of RAM here, because my employees are not. There is no space sufficient for my employees. Please go, please go ahead and do that. Now Dell will take about 2 or 3 days, and they will go ahead and, let's say, upgrade your RAM. Again, after 2 or 3 months, the employees are again coming back and telling that the 500 GB hard drive that basically came with the system is not sufficient. We need some more space to store our data and etc. Then again, I call Dell and I say, okay, fine. You know what? I want a 1 TB hard drive because this is not sufficient. And Dell, basically helps me upgrade. But what is the limitation? If I am right now at 6 GB of RAM, again the employees are coming, the business is expanding, the demand is more. So can I go for 16? Okay, fine. The system can support 16. Can I go for 32? Maybe. 64? May not. 128 GB of RAM? It's very, very distant reality. Meaning the physical machines that we do have, firstly, have a limitation of something known as scalability. Very, very, very important concept is that scalability. And I'm saying that there is a limitation here on how much a machine can actually scale up. Meaning, if an employee is telling me that, okay, fine, you know what, I I am not satisfied with the RAM basically that I do have. I only have 4 GB. But because of the amount of tools that we have installed in the system, because of the amount of daily activity that we do on the system, the capacity is much more higher than what we are expecting. So I want it to scale up. Then another employee comes in and says, okay, fine, you know what? My work is not that much. So I don't need a 4 GB RAM or I don't rather need a 6 GB RAM. I can scale down. Even that will take some time because I have to remove the RAM, I have to reformat my operating system and all that stuff. Let's say you have another employee joining in, you'll need to purchase a machine. Again, going basically placing an order and paying for that. It'll at least take 1 or 2 days in order to, let's say, purchase a machine and then install operating systems and all that stuff. Now, this is an issue with the physical world. And one of the foremost issue is scalability. The other issue is something known as time to market, meaning it will take a lot of time for purchasing, placing orders, and etc. So I'll say it is time to market. So scalability, time to market, and also the cost that is involved with all these things out. Now, let's say I don't do this. Let's say I don't go ahead and use this model. Rather, I will say, okay, fine, I'll act a bit smart and I'll say, okay, fine, you know what? The same company again, same users again, but this time around, the story is slightly a bit different. Wherein now I'm telling that, okay, fine, you know what? Instead of going for or instead of buying physical machines, any which ways I'm using something known as portal.azure.com because my entire applications are on portal.azure.com. So why don't I create something known as virtual machines for these people? There are three. Great, not a problem. I am okay to go ahead and create 3 different virtual machines for each and every employee of mine. For each and every employee of mine, I can go ahead and let's say create 3 different virtual machines out here. And now I am solving a lot of issues. Now, the first issue that I'm solving out here is that the cost. Now, it is very important to say that a virtual machine costs very less than what a physical machine does. Also, it depends upon the size, depends upon the capacity and etc. Two is the biggest problem is scalability. Now, let's say if the employee one is coming to me and complaining that, you know what, this machine that I'm basically working on just has somewhere around 4 GB capacity. I'm not satisfied with this. I want an additional 4 GB. Now, I don't have to go to anywhere. I don't have to do anything. I just have to come to the portal and I can scale this machine to 8 GB and the time it takes is around 2 minutes. It's just around 2 minutes. Instead of 2 days, I am cutting down the entire time to almost 100% of it. And I'm telling, okay, fine, give me 2 minutes. I will scale your machine up and I'll give it to you. Same way, if this person is saying, okay, fine, you know what, 8 GB is like too, I mean, very much for me. Can you scale it down? I can get it back to 4 GB again 2 minutes. So scaling up and scaling down, or the factor called scalability, has now basically come into picture, which is making life very, very easier. In the same way, the concept for time to market, meaning the time that I take to create a virtual machine, is somewhere around 3 to 4 minutes. This is the amount of time it takes to go ahead and create a new virtual machine and assign it to one of my employees. And also, I don't have to worry about the maintenance of the hardware. Microsoft will take care of it. And virtual machines are a classic example of infrastructure as a service. That I will give you the infrastructure, and I'm giving the infrastructure as a virtual machine. Now you tell me, how do you want to use the virtual machine? What do you want to do with this virtual machine? I don't care. Whatever software that you want me to install on top of it, meaning whatever operating system that you want me to install on top of it, I will install and give it to you. Now this is a virtual machine service, guys, or this is an example of a virtual machine service on how we use it from a consumer perspective. I'm not still talking about how virtual machines are used from a business perspective. That is something that we'll see in the coming classes. But from a consumer perspective, this is what it is. So whenever, let's say, if you are in a dilemma about what exactly is the use of virtual machine, just think about the example of a company and the employees under it, and how can it solve, let's say, one of the business needs out here. So any questions before we go ahead, guys? Anything that I can take before we go ahead? Anyone, any questions?
Sir, what is
Yes,
the
sir,
limit
Kiran.
to scale up to?
Yes, sorry. 1 second. Yes, Rich, go ahead, please.
Sir, what is the limit to up to scale up? And
There is technically no limit. Like, I have seen virtual machines with 32,000 GB capacity, like 32, 33,000 GB of capacity of RAM. That is what I'm talking about. So there is technically no limit to what a virtual machines can really scale up, but it completely depends upon what you're trying to achieve with that particular virtual machine. Like, what you're trying to do, whether are you in, let's say, artificial intelligence, or are you, let's say, something like, are you not looking that high, looking something low or something like that.
okay, sir, thank you.
Okay. Yes, someone else had a question. Surya, was that you?
Yeah, that's me, sir.
Yes,
Sir,
please
you
go ahead.
said that the virtual machine not having a physical structure.
I said that yes, virtual machine doesn't have a physical structure, but all the
Mm,
physical components in the backend are taken care by Microsoft. This is nothing but a
mm,
server. All the physical
okay.
components are by backend taken care by Microsoft. It does have a physical, let's say, it does have RAM and etc., but
Yeah,
that is something that you don't take care of.
yeah. And we're going to operate from our laptop or from our system.
Yes, we are going to operate it from our system. I'll show you how to do that.
Yeah, okay, sir. It was just connection from the Microsoft to
Yes.
access the virtual machine. Thank you. Thanks.
Hello, sir.
Yes, yes,
Hello,
please go ahead. Yeah, hello,
sir.
please go ahead.
What is the scalability, sir? Scalability data.
Scalability, the scale definition of scalability is very simple. If you are going from, let's say, if you have a 2 GB, if, let's say, if
Okay,
you want to increase your capacity to 4 or decrease your
okay,
capacity to 1, it's
okay,
known as scalability.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions that I can take, guys, before we go ahead? Okay. So then how do I create a virtual machine then? So if this is like so great, then how do I create a virtual machine then? So you can either come here and you'll have, let's say, something known as virtual machines. So you have something known as virtual machines here. I'll say, okay, fine. Please go ahead and create a virtual machine for me. And it will open up a portal for you telling, okay, fine, what are the details and etc. And there are actually a lot of details. So let's go ahead, look at one after the other. Firstly, it's asking me for the subscription. Like whenever you went ahead and created a storage account also, it went ahead and asked for what is the subscription, let's say, in which you want to create it. And it's now asking me what is the resource group. I don't have a resource group. So I'll say, okay, fine. this is TestRG. I'm giving a small name here called as TestRG. And now it's asking me, what is the name of the virtual machine that you want to provide here? I will say, okay, fine. Since I am doing a first virtual machine right now, I'll just say this is first VM. I'm just saying, okay, fine, this is the first VM. Coming down, it's asking me, okay, fine, you know what? You want to create a virtual machine. So I need to make sure that I give you something in the backend. Like there is a backend server, right? Because you're creating a virtual machine, but I still want to attach that particular virtual machine to a physical server in the backend. Can you please tell me which region of the world or which data center of the world that you want me to provide this virtual machine to you? I'll say, okay, fine. I'll go for ECS2. That's okay with me. And I'll select the region as ECS2. And you can select a number of regions from this particular location. And do you see here now I'm using a free service. So this is a free trial account. Like I had some issues with my pay as you go. So I basically canceled it and went to a free subscription out here. And it says free services available, free services eligible, and etc. So I'll say, okay, fine. I'll take East US and I'll say, okay, fine. I'll go for free service eligibility. And it's now asking me something known as availability options. Now, we'll not take this topic known as availability right now. We'll discuss it sometime, sometime later. This will come sometime later in our course. So here, I'll just select no infrastructure redundancy required. Now, what is this? What is all that? We'll look into that. Now it says, okay, fine, no infrastructure redundancy required. I'm okay with that. Security type, I'm just going with the standard security. And this is where one very important concept comes in called image. It's asking me now that, what kind of an image or what kind of an operating system you want to have installed or you want me to have installed on this particular machine. So since you have to access your machine even for the first time, right? You need some kind of an operating system out here. So can you please tell me what kind of an operating system that you want to go ahead and let's say add, or what kind of an operating system that you want me to add to your virtual machine right now? Now, since we are looking things from a consumer perspective, I will say, you know what, my operating system is a Windows 10 Pro. Like I want to go for a Windows 10 Pro operating system out here because this is a home operating system and I want to make sure that I give some of my employees the access to go ahead and uh, let's say use that particular virtual machine out there. And I say, okay, fine, this is Windows 10 Pro, but there are a lot of images that are available out there in the market. Meaning there is Ubuntu server, there is Red Hat, Oracle, a lot of things out here. Windows Data Center 2022, 2019, a lot of things. But right now I am saying, okay, fine, I want to go ahead and purchase, or I want to go ahead and let's say create something known as a Windows 10 Pro operating system out here. And then it's asking me, okay, great, it's Windows 10 Pro, I'll give you that. Can you please tell me what is the size of the virtual machine that you want to go for? Meaning it's now asking me how big or how small of a virtual machine do you want? And there are a lot of sizes. This is the availability out here. Now I am selecting something known as DS2V3, and this particular size, if you look at carefully, there are a couple of things. Something known as vCPU, meaning virtual CPUs, meaning very simple. If you go to a market and if you purchase a laptop, they will tell you this is a quad core CPU. Sorry, this is a quad core CPU or an octa core CPU or a 2-core CPU, or meaning dual core CPU and etc. So which means that in the backend there are about two small systems in your, let's say, laptop, or two, let's say, small processors in your laptop, which will help you perform daily activities. Let's say you want to watch videos, or you want to, let's say, do any basically operation, you need a processor. Here Microsoft is telling you, okay, fine, you need a processor, but do you need a 2-core processor or a 4-core or a 16-core, whatever it is? And as the number of cores increase, so will the price. So you have, let's say, in D series of machines, these are known as series out here, and it says most frequently used machines are these things. And if I, let's say, go to something like FX series and etc., you have machines that run on 48 core processors also. In the market today, the maximum that you have is an 8 core. 8 core is like, very, very, very big machine. But Microsoft is also offering something like 48 core machines also. And if you go more, the number of cores actually increase. And as the number of cores increase, so does the price. So if you look at the pricing model of this particular machine out here, now I'm not able to load this full screen. Let's see. Yes, so this is how the price is. And this is for a monthly price. I'm talking about per a month. This is the cost that basically that you get incurred. Depending upon the size that you go for, depending upon the capacity that you go for, this is how the pricing model actually changes. So in our case, what I'm going to do is that since we are just testing things out, I'll use something known as a very small size out here. So let me just scroll this down. So I'm using, let's say, something like a DS2 V3 size out here. Let's close this. So I'm using just a very small size, which is called DS2 V3, which is available, let's say, for me, or D2S, V4, which is coming with a 2-core CPU, meaning 2 CPUs, 8 GB RAM, and 4 data disks. Meaning this is optional. You can add your data disks, meaning the maximum data disks that you can add here are 4. So let's talk about that. Now, I'll just select this particular size and I'll say, okay, fine, please select this one out. I'm good with this. And it says, it says, I will cost you somewhere around 5,048 rupees per month, 5048 per month. If you're using this machine 24/7 in a month, in 30 days, if you're using this machine like about 24/7, the estimated cost of, let's say, running this machine is somewhere around 5,048 rupees. Great. I said, okay, fine, not a problem. Now the question here is that, can I change the name of the virtual machine after I create it? No, you cannot do that. Can I change the location? No, you cannot also do that. Can I change the operating system? No, you cannot do that. Can I change the size? Definitely yes. It'll take about 2 to 3 minutes for you to scale up or scale down, depending upon whether the size is available in, let's say, a free trial subscription or not. So can I change my size? Definitely yes. This is the reason why we are going for a virtual machine service, because it offers something known as scalability out here. You can change the size, let's say, to a different version. Like from D, you can go for A or B series, and you can come down to D again, depending upon the usage, depending upon the capacity. You can monitor this out. Now I'm saying, okay, great. The size is great, fine, not a problem. Then it's asking me, okay, fine, this is a computer, right? So can you please go ahead and give me something known as the username and password? So I'll just give a test user as a random user, and I'll just give a password called Microsoft-001. So I'm just giving a username and a password. Now, very importantly, it's telling me inbound port rules. We'll talk about what ports are and all that stuff. For now, I'll say this is none. I'm saying public inbound ports are none. We'll talk about what ports are. For now, I'm just saying this is none. Coming down, since I'm using a Windows 10 server, I'll just say I confirm I'm eligible for a Windows 10 license and etc. I'll just do this confirmation and I'll go next. And in the next screen, I am now asked to go ahead and select something known as a disk. Now, why do you need a disk? Simple. In my system also, without a disk or without a drive, I cannot even go ahead and install the operating system. So I need a hard drive to store operating systems and basically in the files and etc. So now it's asking me, okay, fine. What is the OS disk type? And there are a couple of things out here called premium SSD, standard SSD, standard HDD. Meaning, do you want your disk, meaning do you want your data disk, do you want your OS disk to be something like solid state drive or do you want it to be hard drive? If it's a solid state drive, just like a premium storage account, your processing speed is going to be very quick, meaning the rate at which you write and the rate at which you retrieve the data is very high. So I'm saying, okay, fine, it's a premium SSD, not a problem. I'll go for a premium SSD. And it's giving me one very important concept here, telling that encryption type. Encryption is nothing but protecting your data. Now it's telling me you have the operating system disk here. I will install something known as OS. And if I install your OS, even your OS needs, or your OS also has some files that you want to protect, right? So don't worry about the protection. I will take care of it. And I will protect it using something known as platform managed keys. Meaning Microsoft in the backend will have basically will maintain all these keys out here, and it will protect your system from people accessing the data just like that. Meaning people from the outside world cannot really access the data here because the data is encrypted, and it's encrypted by using something known as platform managed key. Platform here is Microsoft, so it is a Microsoft managed key. So it's telling encryption at rest, meaning when your data is not being used by your users, I will encrypt and keep the data in an encrypted state so that no one can actually grab your data. And I'm calling this as encryption at rest with a platform managed key. And I will encrypt the entire OS disk. I will encrypt the entire operating system disks out here. And finally, when I go down, it's telling me, okay, fine, you know what? I also have an option, or you also have an option to go ahead and attach something known as data disks. Meaning when we created this machine, the size was D2AS underscore V3, which can at the max give you 4 data disks because it's telling you the maximum data disk is 4. But we'll look into that at a later point in time. And now I'm saying, okay, fine, I don't need a data disk right now because I am not using that. So I'm good with that. So I am not using a data disk. I only want the OS disk. That's it. I am at this point only concerned about something known as an OS disk. So I'm good with it. And I'll say next. Now it's telling me there is something known as networking. Now it's asking me what is the virtual network that you want to go for. Very, very important. Meaning a virtual machine cannot exist without a virtual network in place. Yesterday we discussed about what virtual network is. We said virtual network has an address space, and inside the virtual network you can have multiple subnets. So inside a subnet is where you can go ahead and create a virtual machine, a VM in short. So a virtual machine cannot exist without a virtual network and without a subnet. It cannot exist without a virtual network and without a subnet basically. So that's the reason Microsoft is now asking you, okay, fine, great. Can you please tell me what is the name of the virtual network? You can create a new virtual network, but I'm going with the default and I'm saying it is test RGVNet, which is a 10.0.0.0/16 address space. And I'm saying the subnet of the virtual network is 10.0.0.0/24. This is the subnet that I want to create. And finally, it's asking me, you're creating a virtual machine, great. Do you want the world outside, or let's say I am a user who's coming from, let's say, the internet. Do you want this user to access your virtual machine with, let's say, the right ID and password? If I say yes, then I'll have to provide something known as a public IP for this virtual machine. This virtual machine needs something known as public IP so that I can now basically call, or I can now basically interact with this virtual machine using this particular public IP. If you do not have a public IP, very simple, I won't be able to basically from a world outside, I won't be able to go ahead, or from outside the virtual network, I won't be able to go ahead and interact with this particular virtual machine. So that's the reason I'm saying, okay, fine. Virtual network is the default. Subnet is also basically whatever you give. Public IP is also okay. Now I'm coming down and not doing anything. I'm saying next management. And in management, you have something known as monitoring and boot diagnostics. For now, I'll just disable this. I'm just disabling something known as a boot diagnostics out here. Finally, advanced. I'm doing nothing here. There is nothing that I need to do at this point here. I'll say tags. You can tag your resources. You can say which team it belongs to and etc. It's again optional. Finally, review and create. Now it's trying to see whether I'm creating everything. I mean, I have given all the details in the right way. And once it says, okay, fine, everything is good, it now goes ahead and creates something known as a virtual machine. So let's give it a second. Let it run the final validation. And once it says valid, then I can go ahead and provision a virtual machine out here. It says validation passed. And it says you are costed somewhere around 6 rupees per an hour if you run this virtual machine. I'll say yes, great, not a problem. I'll say create. Now this is going to take somewhere around 2 to 3 minutes of time to go ahead and create the machine. So until then, guys, any questions still here that I can take? Anything, anyone? At any point, did anyone not understand anything?
So we need be a merchant should resource group, right? For creating a
I'm
virtual.
sorry.
Okay.
Yes, you
Yes,
need a
correct.
resource group. Resource group, you need anything you want to create, you need a resource group.
Mm.
Any more questions, guys? Any more questions that I can take here? Okay, so let me come back to our drawing board and let me explain the creation of a virtual machine out here. Now we went ahead on the portal and we said, okay, fine, we need a virtual machine. We want to create a virtual machine, etc. And we filled out a couple of details out here, right? What is the order of creation? Meaning, the very first thing that gets created is not a virtual machine. Virtual machine is the last resource that will get created. This is important. Please let me know if you're not able to follow anything. The very first thing that gets created is a virtual network. Now, in my case, the virtual network is something like 10.0.0.0/16. And inside that particular virtual network, you will have a subnet that is getting created. Two things. Just 10.0.0.0/24 is the subnet basically that gets created. Now, after the subnet getting created, you will have something known as a public IP address that is getting created. Public IP address is outside the virtual network. And since this is outside the virtual network, you'll be able to access this particular public IP, or you'll be able to access this virtual machine using this public IP address. So I'm talking about something known as public IP. Public IP address is getting created. Now, fourth, very importantly, you will have something known as NIC card that is getting created. NIC card. What is NIC card? Very simple. Network interface card. This is one of the most important component in any of the system. Even in your system, you will have something known as NIC card. And since you have an NIC card, since that you have an NIC card, you are able to communicate with the internet. or your laptop is able to communicate with your printer, and your printer is able to again communicate with, let's say, your laptop back again. So NIC is a communication, or let's say is like very, very important for something known as communication out here. And NIC cards are used for this particular purpose to, let's say, communicate with things around, let's say talk to, resources and etc. This is one of the most important resources that gets created, and the public IP that we have created gets attached to the network interface card. And this subnet, right, which is 10.0.0.0/24, will give me 251 usable private IPs, of which one of the private IP will get assigned to the NIC card. So now I'm saying that a NIC card can have both public and private IP, will definitely have a private IP. Public IP depends upon whether you want to attach a public IP to it or not. Very importantly, NIC card is the resource which will hold both the public and the private IPs with it. Public and the private IPs are getting attached to the NIC card. I'm emphasizing this again and again because virtual machine is not the resource which will have or which will get attached to the public IP and the private IP. Is the NIC card basically which has this properties. And finally, we have the virtual machine and the OS disk that is attached to the virtual machine that gets created, and the NIC card is attached to this particular virtual machine. The NIC card basically gets attached to this virtual machine. So all the properties of the NIC card are now taken by the virtual machine. This is how the order of creation is. So very firstly, virtual network, second subnet, third a public IP, fourth a NIC card, private and the public IP get attached to the NIC card. 5 finally is a virtual machine that gets created. Now if you look at this creation out here, that is what would have happened. It's saying public IP addresses will talk about what network security group rules are. Then you have a virtual network. Sorry, then you have a virtual network, then you have a network interface card. Finally, you have a virtual machine out here. This is how my resources are getting created. And let me go into the resource group right now. And let me see what are all the resources that got created. Virtual machine, public IP. Let's talk about what this is. I haven't explained what NSG is. Let's talk about that in a while. You have something known as interface card. And I have said that I need an operating system disk. So that's the reason it went ahead and created something known as a disk. Finally, I have the virtual network. This is the order in which I have went ahead. And I said I need my virtual machine, the associated resources to be created. Now the question is that, okay, fine, you have created a virtual machine. How do you access this virtual machine? Using what do you access this virtual machine? What do you do with this virtual machine? So I have come inside my virtual machine, and this is how the virtual machine looks like. You have a test RG. It's saying, okay, fine, in the overview page, it's saying, okay, fine, the resource group name is a test RG. Operating system is a Windows 10 Pro operating system. The status of the virtual machine is that it's running. It's in a location known as East US 2. The size of the virtual machine is standard D2ASV4. And then you have something known as a public IP address for the virtual machine. And if you just scroll down, you have something known as a private IP address for the virtual machine as well. And then it says, okay, fine, there are a lot of details out here, like the subscription ID, the virtual network, and everything, which is great. But the question here is, how do I connect with this virtual machine? What do I do to connect to this virtual machine? Now, very importantly, guys, this virtual machine resides inside a virtual network. And yesterday we said that virtual network is a resource that which helps you provide an isolation. Meaning, if I am a user that is coming from the internet, I am a user who's coming from the internet, I want to get attached, or let's say want to get basically, or I want to connect with this particular virtual machine. And this virtual machine has something known as a public IP address. This virtual machine has something known as a public IP address out here. So what I'll be doing is that I will use this public IP address. I will make use of the public IP address and I will connect to this particular virtual machine from my laptop. How do I do that? I just copy this out. There's something known as copy to clipboard. I'll just copy, and in a Windows 10 machine or any Windows 7, any Windows machine, I'll say remote desktop connection. This is by default an application that comes in your systems, so you don't have to install anything. And I'll say remote desktop connections. I'll say okay, fine, this is, let's say, the name of the computer, and I'll say connect. Now what happens is that it tries to establish, my laptop is trying to establish a connection with a virtual machine that is sitting inside a virtual network. Now please follow my words. I am trying to establish from my laptop a connection between my laptop and the virtual machine that is sitting inside a virtual network. Now I am again saying that a virtual network is an isolation. By default, it won't allow anyone from outside the virtual network to interact with resources inside it. So now, like yesterday when we went ahead and, let's say, added a virtual network on top of the storage account, right? It went ahead and it was throwing an error telling that, you know what, forbidden access, you are not allowed to access this particular storage account and etc. The reason it was telling that, it's because it's inside the virtual network. In the same way, the virtual machine is inside the virtual network, and it threw an error telling that okay, fine, remote desktop can't connect or cannot, basically I cannot help you connecting to this computer because I have nowhere said to allow the remote desktop connections. Now this is a remote desktop. I have nowhere mentioned while the creation that please go ahead and allow remote desktop connections, meaning there are a set of rules which basically control who can access, how can they access, or to whom the virtual machine can actually talk to from within, let's say, the virtual network. And these set of rules together are called as network security group rules, NSG. Network is the virtual network, security is security, and group. It's saying okay, fine, there is something known as network security group rules which controls the security of a virtual network and which directs how the virtual machine should talk, basically, or who can access this particular virtual machine as such. If I come to the virtual machine here, there is something known as networking, right? And inside networking, there is something known as rules, and there are by default some rules and I haven't added anything else. So what I will do is that I'm saying that okay, fine, I want to do a remote desktop connection to this particular virtual machine so that I can connect with it. So I'll say add an inbound rule, and I'll leave everything, let's say, as the way it is. It is all that stuff. I'll say the service here is something known as an RDP, remote desktop port, meaning I am opening up something known as a port on the virtual machine. A port is used for communication and etc. So I'm opening up a port for a service known as remote desktop connection, and I'm calling this port as RDP, and the port number, each and every port will have a number. The port number here is 3389. It's a 3389 port from which I'm talking to the system over an RDP connection, and I'm saying okay, fine, great. I'll just change the name of the rule basically that I'm adding. I'll say port 3389 allow, and I'm saying add. This is how I am adding something known as a security rule out here. I could have also done this while creation of the virtual machine, but I haven't done there. So I'm just saying that okay, fine, please go ahead, take all the defaults and add a port called 3389 allow, and the number of the port is 3389, connection is TCP and all that stuff. So I am adding something known as an inbound security rule, and I'm telling this rule that, you know what, whoever is the user, if he knows the public IP and if he knows the ID and password, please allow him to connect to this particular virtual machine over a port number called 3389, which is RDP, remote desktop protocol or remote desktop connections and etc. I am allowing this. So now what I do is if I go here using the same public IP, if I say connect, it's telling me, okay, fine, can you please go ahead and say, give me your ID and password. And the ID and password was the one that we created when we were creating the virtual machine. So it's a test user, and let's say Microsoft-001, and it gives you this particular certificate telling that do you want to accept this or not. Just say yes, and in a second you'll be able to go inside the virtual machine right now. So it says, okay, fine, test user, I'm welcoming you, and this is what your system would ideally say, right? Saying, okay, fine, test user, you're welcome inside this, and you're going inside the particular virtual machine out here. So let's give it a second and let's see what happens here. So it'll take some time and it'll tell you, okay, fine, since this is the first time I'm booting into this machine, since the first time I'm starting up my machine, you'll get all these, accept and everything. I'll just say accept, and you are on a Windows machine. Like I have done an RDP into a Windows machine that is running on an Azure cloud, and you can now start using this machine. You don't have to do anything apart from this. You can now start using this particular machine, and this is how we create a virtual machine, guys. And how do you connect to it again? So I have this virtual machine that is running. I went ahead, took something known as a public IP, and I said remote desktop, and I entered into the remote desktop. I entered the ID and the password, and I was able to boot into this particular machine. This is how we create, and this is how we start using the virtual machine. But today I just explain how to use a virtual machine from a consumer perspective. Like I'm a consumer, I just want to use, let's say, a Windows 10 operating system. How do I use it? This is how I basically go ahead and start using this out. But let's see tomorrow on how do you use it as a business. Like let's say I'm a business, how do you use that as a business and etc. So let's see that whenever we meet the next time. Okay, any questions still here, guys? Anything that I can take?
At the time of you're creating, right, virtual machine, it there only ask, right, something inbound, one option
Inbound
is,
port, yes, exactly. That's the reason I said you can also go ahead and create that at that point also. But I wanted to explain if you don't do that, what will happen and how can you do that after creating it out.
oh, okay.
Okay, any more questions, guys?
Yeah, hi. How many NIC cards will be assigned to one virtual machine?
Okay, great question. So you can have, let's say, multiple NIC cards assigned to a virtual machine. But for a use case scenario, like let's say for any use case scenario, what we do is that we assign one NIC card for a virtual machine. Like one-to-one relationship is what we kind of maintain.
Okay. And again, NIC cards have redundant ports, right?
Sorry, NIC cards have?
I mean, multiple ports, right, to communicate with the others.
Yes. You can have multiple ports to the NIC card to communicate things, let's say, to the outside world and accept communication from the outside world as well.
Yeah, if that is the case, then we need to assign multiple private IPs, right, for each port.
Not really. So you can have multiple ports assigned to the same NIC card. And with that particular private IP that is assigned to the NIC card, will use those ports in order to communicate.
So that same IP can be used for multiple.
Yes. Communications, yes.
Okay, got it. Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions that I can take, guys?
So we can create this as virtual machine as a server. We can subnets where just like a machine, client machines like that. What are, we just when we can subnets we just as a client machines, and we need to be access the servers. It's just like we need to
No,
set up right.
didn't get you. I'm sorry, I didn't get you. I didn't get your
No,
question.
no. This virtual machine we can create it as just like a server.
Okay.
Okay, and we are creating subnets right in the
Mm-hmm.
virtual. Yeah, we can establish the dumps in a server. So what are the we are having to develop the new environment.
Mm-hmm.
We can access the application through that subnets to
Yes,
virtual machines
we'll
like
come to that. Now there's a bit of confusion that you're going through. Now subnet is for, let's say, a subnet is a component of a virtual network. Now
Mhm.
server is for a business use case scenario. We'll look into
Okay.
that. Like what exactly is a server? Like
Mhm.
what is a difference between a Windows home operating system and a server and etc. We'll look into that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, any more questions here, guys? Okay, then if there are no further questions, then we're going to close the session for today, guys. And we will not be having a session tomorrow since it's Saturday. But since I've missed one day in the week, I'll go ahead and take a session on Sunday. I'll just give the information in the group. Let's say by the end of this day. Okay. Okay, guys. Then have a great day ahead, and we'll meet next time. Thank you.